Few moments in American history have left a deeper scar on the nation's consciousness than what happened in Jonestown. It's one of those events that still haunts us, even decades later. Up until the September 11th attacks, the Jonestown massacre represented the largest loss of American civilian life in a non-natural event.
These people never had a chance. They had been victims of racism, they were victims of poverty. Jim Jones came along and offered them something. They trusted him and they believed him, but he was a crazy son of a bitch. And he was willing to see them all die.
It wasn't a natural event or an act of war, but something far more chilling. It was an event that unfolded in a remote jungle, led by a man who promised salvation, but delivered tragedy.
The sickness of the people, however it happened, there's a sickness. Jim Jones by himself can't kill 913 people.
What started as a religious movement offering hope and equality to its followers spiraled into a twisted turn of paranoia, manipulation, and ultimately, mass death. People flocked to Jonestown, believing in the vision of a utopian society created by Jim Jones himself, where race and class wouldn't matter. The story of the People's Temple truly begins with its enigmatic and increasingly dangerous leader, Jim Jones.
He used to say, when I go, I'll be the most hated man on the planet. My name will be on everybody's lips. Guess what? It was.
Born on May 13th in 1931 in Indiana, Jones initially appeared to be a man of vision and compassion. His congregation, the People's Temple, wasn't just any church. It was a beacon of racial justice and equality in the 1950s, a time when segregation and discrimination were the norm. Jones championed the rights of African Americans and other marginalized groups, inviting people from all walks of life to join his cause. He promised hope, unity, and social change. In fact, the People's Temple became known for its integrated communities and its mission to uplift those in need. And early on, it looked like Jones was on a mission to make a real difference.
People's Temple was really looked upon as a marvelous enterprise.
He had a rehabilitation center for drug addicts. There's a senior citizen home where people could come and live.
You going to go to Texas with me when I have that campaign?
I was just wondering when I could go out.
They housed the homeless. They had a daycare. They had a medical clinic.
Every single person that joined People's Temple, every single one, they were so good. They wanted something better.
True concern that has been shown to me and belief that someone cares for me.
But that hopeful image didn't last long. Despite the progressive and inclusive message Jones spread, something darker was brewing beneath the surface. Over time, Jones became increasingly paranoid and power-hungry. His initial messages of equality started to shift into more extreme beliefs and ideologies. He convinced his congregation that he had psychic abilities, claiming to be able to heal the sick and foresee the future.
Some people see a great deal of God in my body. They see Christ in me, a hope of glory.
One of his most infamous predictions involved the visions of a nuclear holocaust. Jones warned his followers that a catastrophic war would devastate the United States, and only by following him could they escape the destruction.
Armageddon that would spring forth in a nuclear hell, we have to be prepared for that, but we also have to be prepared to go to other places in the world if a dictatorship takes over. Because I told you that not one of my children is going to end up in a concentration camp. I said they'll have to kill us all first.
It wasn't long before these extreme predictions led Jones to uproot his entire church. He convinced his congregation that the only place they would be safe was a small town called Ukiah, California, far from the cities he claimed were destined to be destroyed. But even this move wasn't enough. As time went on, Jones became obsessed with creating a utopian society far away from the prying eyes of the media, law enforcement, and anyone who might question his control. So, in the mid-1970s, he chose an isolated piece of land in Guyana, South America, to build what he called a socialist paradise, Jonestown. In 1974, the People's Temple acquired land in Guyana, and Jones promised his followers that they were building a paradise, a promised land where they could live free from racism, capitalism, and the oppressive forces of the outside world. Unfortunately, the paradise was just an illusion. From the moment the first settlers arrived, it was clear Jonestown wasn't ready for the large influx of people Jones had planned. With the limited infrastructure and resources and harsh working conditions, the reality of life in the jungle quickly became grimmer than anyone had imagined. Nevertheless, Jones convinced hundreds more to make the journey to Guyana, bringing the population to nearly 1,000 by the end of 1977.
Do you want to go back to state?
No.
I don't want to go back either. Nobody wants to go. Everybody's happy down here. You can see that that's an obvious fact.
At first, Jonestown appeared to be a self-sustaining community, with members working the land, building homes, and attending lectures on socialism and equality. But in truth, it was a tightly controlled environment where Jones ruled with an iron fist.
They're on my sight. I was trying to keep some humanity around here. Sit your ass down.
People who worked long hours in the fields were subjected to intense indoctrination sessions and had little to no contact with the outside world. Jones' paranoia escalated to the point where he wouldn't allow anyone to leave the commune, fearing that defectors might expose the darker realities of life in Jonestown.
I thought of it as a community that was being built that had the opportunity to become something that actually might be equivalent to a utopia, filled with good people.
It was something that was absolutely amazing.
As Jones' paranoia intensified, so did his need for control. Behind closed doors, there were accusations of abuse, both physical and sexual. Jones' powers of healing were revealed to be hoaxes, staged miracles involving his own followers' faked illnesses and coughing up tumors that were nothing more than chicken gizzards. Reports surfaced of drugging congregants, faking injuries, and orchestrating elaborate healing performances, all designed to reinforce his supposed divinity. One unforgettable example involved a woman in a wheelchair. During a packed gathering, Jones asked her to stand and walk toward him.
Come forth, my dear. Stand up. Take that step. Bless your heart. Take that step.
As she slowly rose and took a few steps, the crowd erupted into an applause. What they didn't realize was that this was all an act. The woman was one of Jones' secretaries, and the entire event was carefully orchestrated. Jones was losing his grip on reality, and anyone who dared to challenge him was met with his wrath. Yet, despite the growing signs of danger, Jones still had hundreds of loyal followers who trusted him. His messages about fighting for racial justice and creating a better world still resonated with many. But the dream of utopian society would quickly spiral into a nightmare as Jones' grip on his followers tightened, leading them deeper into isolation, both physically and mentally. With the People's Temple now in Guyana, and Jones's followers building a life far removed from any outside influence, the stage was set for one of the darkest moments in American history. A turning point arrived in August of 1977. An explosive article published in New West magazine pulled back the curtain, revealing horrifying allegations of abuse and manipulation within the People's Temple. The revelation shook those who had loved ones in Jonestown, but curiously, people continued to flock to the commune. It was as if they were drawn by the promise of paradise, despite the growing concern that something was terribly wrong. Fast forward to November 17, 1978, U.S. Congressman Leo Ryan from California decided to take action.
The word we were getting was that there was an armed encampment.
His goal was simply to go there and try to determine if people were being held against their will, and if so, to try to get them out of there.
Concerned about the reports of abuse, he flew to Guyana with a small team, including his legal aid and an NBC news crew. Their mission was simple: to uncover the truth about Jonestown. They hoped to bring back answers for anxious families in the U.S.
I'm from the United States government. We're here to inquire into the health and the welfare of American citizens who are here.
When they arrived, they were greeted with smiles and open arms. The people of Jonestown seemed healthy, joyful, and thriving. Children played freely, adults danced and sang, and the place appeared to be a self-sustaining community, almost too perfect. Everything seemed to be in order, with neatly stored food supplies and a seemingly tight-knit group of people working harmoniously. It was as if Jonestown was exactly the peaceful utopia that Jim Jones had promised.
Did all of you know that I'm here to find out more about questions that have been raised about your operation here? But I can tell you right now that from the few conversations I've had with some of the folks here already this evening, that whatever the comments are, there are some people here who believe that this is the best thing that ever happened to them in their whole life.
But despite the outward display of joy and unity, an unshakable feeling of discomfort hung in the air. there were whispers, quiet murmurs, suggesting that life in Jonestown wasn't as rosy as it appeared. People spoke in hushed tones, hinting that leaving was not an option, even for those who desperately wanted to. Things came to a head that very evening. During a cheerful celebration thrown for Senator Ryan, a journalist from the visiting team received a secret note, hastily passed from one of the residents. It read, "Help us get out of Jonestown." That one slip of paper revealed the truth that many in the commune had been far too afraid to share. Then came the boldest revelation. A member of the community approached Senator Ryan with a heavy heart. "We're being held prisoner here," he confessed. The senator, stunned, sought confirmation from others, and it became clear. Jonestown's facade was crumbling. What had been sold as a paradise was in fact a jail. This was the first crack of the grand illusion, setting the stage for a shocking and tragic unraveling. After that, the tension in Jonestown became almost unbearable. But how did things get so grim? To understand, let's rewind back to a time when Jim Jones was a towering figure in the lives of his followers, when he believed that he was a man chosen by God himself. In the early days, Jones worked hard to create a divine image of himself. He staged miracles that mesmerized his congregation, and to keep control of his followers, he devised what he called catharsis meetings. But these were far from spiritual healing sessions. Children and adults could be called to the front, where they'd be struck with a paddle, while the rest of the congregation watched and laughed. These meetings turned into twisted spectacles, all part of Jones's growing control over the minds and bodies of his followers.
I got a hell of a lot of weapons to fight. I got my claws, I got cutlasses, I got guns, I got dynamite, I got a hell of a lot to fight. I'll fight.
Listening to Jim Jones preach till whatever time in the morning he got done. Might be 2, might be 3. You'd get hit with a cane if you were falling asleep. The kids would just be laid all over the floor. They couldn't keep them awake.
Then came the infamous White Nights. These were far more than just emotional manipulation. They were rehearsals for the unthinkable. On these nights, Jones would force his followers to drink a fruit punch, claiming it was poisoned. People drank the Koolaid, believing it might be their last moment alive, but it was all part of Jones's loyalty test. The grim truth of these rehearsals was not that it was just for show. Since 1976, Jones had been quietly stockpiling cyanide, preparing for the mass tragedy that had loomed ahead.
He was a predator who had really mastered the art of luring people from every segment of life.
Jones also planted fear into his followers about the world beyond Jonestown. He portrayed the Guyana jungle as a death trap, filled with animals and treacherous terrain, convincing them that escaping was a pure path to death. In the midst of all of the manipulation, daily life in Jonestown was an eerie balance of communal living and psychological warfare. Mornings started with strict routines, and the evenings ended with Jones delivering lengthy speeches, always filled with fear-mongering and control tactics. These lengthy speeches sometimes went on for hours. The entire community was held captive, not just physically, but mentally, with trust eroding and paranoia growing as each day passed.
He was an extremely powerful preacher. He is outspoken about race and class.
And he took in a lot of people who were disenfranchised, and they loved him, and he mesmerized them.
He could rail. I mean, he could just light up. I mean, his whole body punctuated what he was saying.
For many in Jonestown, life became a torturous cycle of hope for an escape, mixed with the dread that they would never be able to break free from Jim Jones' iron grip. Every day felt more and more like an inescapable trap, as they were caught in a web of fear, manipulation, and a man who seemed willing to take them all down with him. After a few brave followers revealed to Senator Ryan that they were being held captive in Jonestown, the situation quickly escalated. The courage of these sparked a wave of confessions from over a dozen members, all desperate to escape the oppressive control of Jim Jones. Confronted by his mass defection, Jones, though shocked, kept his calm and didn't make a scene at the moment. However, everyone knew something darker was lurking beneath his controlled exterior.
No, you're not going. You're not going. You're not going.
With Senator Ryan organizing the departure of the defectors, the atmosphere was thick with tension. The group gathered their belongings quietly, with an unsettling silence hanging in the air as they prepared their journey to freedom. The trek to Port Kaituma airstrip was rough, the 6-mile dirt road bumpy and in poor condition, Added to the group's mounting anxiety, no one dared to speak, but fear was etched on their faces. Once at the airstrip, chaos ensued. The group of 33 people total was preparing to board 2 planes when the unexpected happened. A truck filled with armed men arrived. Clearly, they had been followed. Without warning, gunfire erupted, shattering the tense silence. Many were killed instantly, including NBC reporter Dan Harris, Senator Ryan, and cameraman Bob Brown. Several others were severely wounded in the bloody chaos. As the gunmen sped away in their truck, the survivors barely had time to comprehend the tragedy before more terror struck. In one of the planes, a man pretending to be a defector pulled out a gun and started shooting at close range, adding to the nightmare unfolding on what was supposed to be their escape route. What was meant to be a safe passage out of Jonestown turned out to be a massacre. For those who survived, the airstrip had become a scene of horror, where the fight for freedom had become a fight for survival. After the brutal attack at the airstrip, what followed in Jonestown was even more horrifying, a reality beyond anything imagined. On that day, November 18th, 1978, Jim Jones gathered all of his followers at the pavilion, delivering a chilling order. What had once been terrifying drills, the so-called mock suicides, would now be real. Armed guards then surrounded the area, reinforcing that there would be no way out for those who wanted to escape.
Plain as I know how to tell you, I've never lied to you. I never have lied to you.
Jim Jones, always the manipulator, had already ordered cyanide to be mixed with the grape-flavored Koolaid. It was a deadly concoction, prepared for what he chillingly called revolutionary suicide. As the poison was passed around, everything was captured on an audio recorder. For 45 agonizing minutes, Jones can be heard manipulating his followers, using fear to drive them toward this tragic end.
Gather in, folks, it's easy. It's easy.
Jim Jones spent the final moments of his followers' lives explaining to them unimaginable horrors, an army that would come to torture them if they didn't act now. Some of his followers, gripped by fear, protested and begged for their lives. But there was no mercy in Jonestown. The moment of no return had arrived.
If we can't live in peace, then let's die in peace.
The scene quickly turned into chaos. Some members either resigned or brainwashed, drank the poison willingly. Others had no choice, forced to drink at gunpoint. The recording becomes harder to listen to, filled with heartbreaking sounds of confusion, panic, and people realizing there was no way out.
Die with a degree of dignity. Lay down your life with dignity. Don't lay down with tears and agony. Don't be this way.
In total, nearly 1,000 people perished that day, including 304 innocent children. Their deaths were particularly haunting. Too small to drink from cups, the poison was injected into their mouths using syringes, administered by their own parents, who were trapped in Jones's madness. As the final moments of Jonestown unfolded, the community once filled with dreams of a better life was silenced forever. The haunting aftermath left the world in shock, and the name Jonestown became synonymous with tragedy and manipulation on an unimaginable scale. Hey everyone, thank you for joining me as we dove into Jim Jones and the People's Temple cult. If you enjoyed the video, please feel free to like and subscribe. If you have a topic you'd like to see us cover in the future, drop a comment. And always remember, don't drink the Kool-Aid.